Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. In this particular lecture, we are going to discuss a theory from ethics, and that is called relativism theory. Right? It's a very important theory, and we're going to discuss in detail. Okay, so let us begin. What is relativism theory first? And if you want to join my Telegram channel, you can join it from this link. And if you want to access all my notes, including this one, you can join the channel, and the link is in the description. Okay, let's begin. So first of all, what is relativism in ethics, right? So relativism in ethics is broadly stated is the theory that moral judgments are relative to some particular standpoints and no standpoint is uniquely privileged over all others, right? So this looks very confusing, right? It's very difficult to understand what exactly relativism from this particular definition. So let's move on and understand from the context. This means that no single universally valid moral code, what's right or wrong, depends on the context. So it is very important to understand that relativism theory said there is nothing called right or wrong, right? Everything depends on the context, right? This word is very important. Context means in a particular context, some things which might be very, very wrong might also be right. That means you cannot say that this action is completely wrong or this action is completely right. It will always depend upon the context. So till the time we don't know the context, we cannot say it as a stand-alone judgment. We cannot pass that judgment, right? So it is very important. Now, if you read the first line, you will be able to understand it much better. That any moral judgment cannot be standpoint or it can be standalone, right? It has to be contextual dependent. It's important to distinguish between the different types of relativism. So now we are going to discuss about the different types of relativism we have. Always remember this word, okay? Context. Let's move on to the first one, and that is called the descriptive relativism. What is descriptive relativism? This simply means that different culture have different moral codes. It is the factual statement about the diversity of the moral beliefs and the practices. It doesn't make any claim about whether one moral code is better than other. So relativism theory clearly says that different culture have different moral codes. In one culture, something can be very right. In the other culture, it might be very difficult or it might be completely wrong. So it will always depend upon in what kind of culture we are living in. So descriptive relativism is all about culture. So if you are living in a Middle East, for there they have a different kind of culture, and for them there could be some things which are very right and there could be something which is very bad. On the other side, if you go to the Western culture, they have different kind of culture, right? They have different kind of their own moral codes. And this theory clearly never ever says that one culture is better than others. So this is also called as cultural relativism. So any good or bad dependent on culture is called descriptive relativism. Okay, let's take an example. Some culture practice polygamy while other consider it as morally wrong. As I told you, in certain countries, polygamy is practiced and it is cherished also. On the other side, there are certain countries which believe that this is completely morally wrong. But descriptive relativism simply notes this difference, right? It never says this is good or this is bad. It only says that it will depend upon the culture. So the context become culture over here in the descriptive relativism. Next we have is called meta-ethical relativism. What is meta-ethical relativism? This goes beyond mere observation. It argues that there are no objective ground for preferring one moral code over another. Moral judgments are only true or false relative to a specific standpoint, a culture or historic period or an individual. So as I told you earlier that the relativism theory never says that one culture or one moral is better than others. It clearly says that for one particular context, some things can be true. On the other side, for some context, it can be false. Right? For example, in one culture, some things can be right. In some culture, it cannot be wrong. It can be wrong. If in a historical period, some things can be right. In a historical period, some things can be wrong. From the perspective of an individual, some things can be right, and from the perspective of another individual, some things can be wrong. So there is no universal moral truth, right? Remember this line for meta-ethical relativism. There is no universal moral truth. So what is the key idea over here? So key idea says moral claims are not objectively true or false, but rather true or false relative to a particular framework. So most of the ethical theories always believe in true or false. They always said either we are true or either we are false. But meta-ethical relativism clearly says it, it is true or false based on the framework, based on the context, right? So word can be context, word can be framework, and I've already explained you, it can be culture, it can be historical period, it can be individual, right? So let's take an example. For example, stealing is wrong is not objectively true. It might be true within certain culture, but it is not universally true. So for some culture, we believe stealing is wrong. For some culture, it might not be wrong, right? Or for some individuals, it might be right, and for some individuals, it might be wrong. So it is not objectively true. It will always depend upon in what context we are talking about. So we cannot say that this is true or false. We will always say it is true or false based on the framework or based on the context. Next we have is normative relativism. What is normative relativism? So this is the most controversial form. It claims that we ought to tolerate the moral practices of other culture, even if they differ from our own. It suggests that it's wrong to judge other cultural moral. So we need to understand that, as I told you, that relativism theory clearly says that no moral code is above or below. It clearly says that every moral code should be respected. But in normative, what happens that we ought to tolerate our moral practices over other cultures. We always treat our culture over others. We always treat our moral practices over others. And we always try to differ from other people, right? Other contexts, other culture. So what is the key idea over here? The key idea is we should be tolerant to different moral values. We need to respect. We should not impose our self-belief or impose our ethics on others, right? We should respect other ethics also, right? They should have their own logic. They should have their own context, right? We should respect that. So what is the problem here? So problem here is that this could lead to moral paralysis and an inability to condemn even the most horrifying practices. How can we criticize human rights abuses if we committed to a normative relativism? Now, this is the problem here because this theory says respect others' moral code. So let's say if something inhuman happening in other countries or in other moral code, we cannot condemn based on this theory. And that is the reason why this is a big problem in normative relativism, right? So in normative relativism, it clearly says respect. But the problem here is that when something inhuman happening, we cannot respect it. We have to condemn it. But in this theory, you cannot condemn it. Okay, I hope you got my point. So what are the arguments which goes with the relativism? Okay, just to before we start this topic, I just let you know that the Hindi lecture is also available for this particular topic. You will find in the description link. Okay, do watch that if you want to watch this lecture in Hindi. So cultural diversity, the wide variation is moral belief across culture seems to support the idea that morality is relative. We need to understand that cultural diversity, right, that always goes in the favor of relativism, that one culture is different from other. One thing is right over here, or one thing right over here, one thing is wrong over here, can be right over there. So we need to cherish that culture. It has tolerance, right? It clearly promotes tolerance. It clearly says that you must respect and value the moral code of other culture, right? And then avoidance of imperialism, it discourage imposing one culture moral wise over other. It clearly says that never ever impose your own belief, your own ethics over others. And fourth one, but what are the arguments that goes against relativism, right? So first thing is moral paralysis. As I told you, if all the morality is relative, how can we condemn even the most heinous acts? We know that in certain cultures, sometimes there are like heinous acts happening. It is against inhuman. It is completely inhuman against humankind, right? We cannot like respect it, right? We have to condemn it. And that is the biggest problem in this theory. Next important thing, inconsistency. When you says that all morality is relative, it's clearly is completely inconsistent, right? Nothing is wrong as per this theory, right? It becomes an absolute statement. So this whole idea of relativism actually uh, makes everything very subjective. It is not objective, right? Next is moral reforms. If morality is relative, how can we explain moral progress? How can we that abolished slavery was a moral improvement, right? So whenever we remove anything which is not good for the society, we cherish it. We say that that is a moral progress for a society. But as per this theory, you will not be able to cherish it, right? You will not be able to enjoy it because the theory says that you have not done something right because morally it is right, morally it is wrong as per this theory. So that is very important. And next important thing is cross cultural agreement. Despite differences, there are some core values. Yes, that is the most important thing. There are certain core moral values. Even though your country can be different, your culture can be different, as an individual you can be different, but there are certain core values which every country follow. So as per this, like for example, there is a prohibition against murder or rape in every society, in every country. You cannot cherish that, right? You cannot say that okay, in my culture it is cherished, right? Because of the theory of relativism, right? I hope you understood all the points against relativism. Okay, so who are the key thinkers who contributed in this theory, right? So while no major philosopher has like endorsed the normative relativism, like, but there are certain people who have contributed to it. Number one is Protagoras. Protagoras was a Socratic philosopher who famously said that man is the measure of all things. Then next one is David Hume. David Hume, again, he played a very crucial role in the role of custom and convention in shaping morality and interpreted as per the form of relativism. And number three was all the anthropologists. So anthropologists, they always emphasize the importance of understanding the culture in their own terms, right? But very few thinkers have supported the normative relativism because that it has a darker side, right? So what is the conclusion? What is the conclusion? Conclusion very simple, that this is a complex theory, right? And this is a very challenging theory also, right? So we always keep on questioning that this particular theory, and it always faces criticism also because of its underlying assumptions. But at the end of the day, this theory also exists in the ethics as just like any other theory, right? So we need to understand, to some extent we can respect the morals of other cultures, but in certain things, for example, there should be a global moral code which every country must follow. That is what my conclusion is. Thank you so much for joining in. I hope you enjoyed this particular lecture. Do support this new channel. I hope you will subscribe this and you will share it with other people. I'll be meeting with you in the next lecture. Bye bye. Take care.